Welcome to another edition of the Voice of Palestine, Voice of the Palestinian People. It's February 15th, 2013, and I'm your co-host, Hanna Qawas. This week we'll be interviewing Dr. Bill Dienst, the co-editor of the Freedom Sailors, a new book about the Free Gaza movement and its 2008 sailing that first broke the Israeli siege on the civilian Palestinian population. Bill will talk about the book and his upcoming speaking tour in British Columbia, as well as the medical conditions in the occupied Palestinian territories. Hi, Bill, and it's good to have you on the Voice of Palestine.
Good afternoon, Hannah, and it's good to hello to everybody in the Vancouver area. Thank you for hosting me.
You're most welcome. Could you tell us, Bill, to start with, how did you get involved in the solidarity movement with Palestine?
Sure, and I will give you an abbreviated story. I'm the son of an Air Force colonel, and we lived overseas in Europe in the 70s when there was the Munich Olympics and there was the attack on the Israeli athletes, and I was appalled like it. And then my father said, you know, there's another side to this story. And a few days later, in the back of a newspaper on page 50, there was a report that Israel bombed southern Lebanon and killed 51 people, and it was supposedly in retaliation to what had happened in Munich. And I was 13 years old at the time, but that kind of raised the spark of, now wait a minute, all these 51 people I don't think had much to do with what happened in Munich. How come they die, and how come this is not on the front page of the newspaper? Mm-hmm. Well, when I got to medical school, this was now 1982, Israel attacked Lebanon again, and 15 to 30,000 people were killed within a month. And I was at this point, I had progressive medical students, and we were interested in El Salvador and Nicaragua and things like that. But nobody was saying anything about what was going on in Lebanon, and I decided to pursue that. And so I started writing articles in the medical school newspaper, and immediately felt the wrath of Zionist professors and students and other students in my class. Mm-hmm. And then one thing led to another, and 3 years later I decided I would go to the region. And so I was hooked up with Palestine-American Health Association out of Atlanta, Georgia, and they sent me to Egypt, where I landed a naive 26-year-old medical student wanting to free the Palestinians, supposedly. And the next day I'm having lunch with Dr. Fatih Arafat, Yasser's younger brother, who ran the Red Crescent Society, and all of a sudden my jaw dropped. And so at that time I spent 2 months in Cairo, and then I took a tour bus from Cairo to Tel Aviv, and then I was in the Golan Heights and all over the West Bank and Gaza for 2.5 months back in 1985. And at that point, you could get around with group taxis all over the West Bank, all over Gaza. I mean, you could go from East Jerusalem to Gaza and be there in 1 hour. Yeah. And that was at a time when Palestinians were the source of cheap labor in Israel. Yeah. And so there were a lot of people from Gaza that worked in Tel Aviv or out on farms, etc. And then in 2003 was the next time I went back. Dr. Yad Saraj, who's the head of Gaza Community Mental Health Program, had been in Seattle, and I knew him from before, and he said, come to Palestine, and so I did. But by 2003, the false hope of Oslo had come and gone, and by this point, Gaza was walled off by a hideous Berlin Wall, and people were trapped, and, things were much, much more grave. And once you've seen these things, you can't put it out of your system.
Yeah.
And so I keep going back. I've been there 2005, 2006, with the flotilla in 2008, and then once with a delegation of physicians in 2009, and hopefully I'll be going again shortly.
Yeah, so you were there in 2003. That's the year when Rachel Corrie was murdered. Were you around that time or after?
Well, she was murdered in March of 2003, and I was there in November of 2003.
So after, yeah.
And I've gotten to know Craig and Cindy Corrie, her parents. I've gotten to know them quite well.
Yeah.
I see them all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, they were. They were here in Vancouver on the International Day of Solidarity just last November. They were excellent, actually. We interviewed them also on the Voice of Palestine, and there is a videotape for their talk on our website, so if people are interested, they could listen to what they have to say. But, Iyad Sarraj, he been really jailed by Arafat, I recall, and he was a critic of the Palestinian Authority, but he does a really magnificent work, especially on the mental health and specifically on the children. Then in 2003, that's 3 years into the second Intifada, I guess, and could you tell us what did you see then, and how the horrific condition of especially the effect of the Israeli, they used to go with these, breaking the sound barrier with the F-16 and F-18 and whatever American weapons they have.
That happened after 2005 because there were Israeli settlers, about 8,000 Israeli settlers in Gaza who controlled about 40% of the land of Gaza, and then they were pulled out in 2005, and then after that they started doing the F-16s, low-altitude sonic boom, scare tactics, because they didn't want to do that when there were Israeli settlers there. But once they were pulled out, then they used that tactic. But back to 2003, when I was there, I was hosted by Iyad Sarraj's Gaza Community Mental Health Program, and the thing that was most striking there was we went down to Rafah on the border with Egypt, and Ariel Sharon had just summarily destroyed block after block of apartments, rendering about 2,000 people homeless in a matter of just a few days, and that had just happened. And so I was taken down there, and we went through the ruins of the destruction, and then we could see Israeli tanks, and then there were snipers, and you had to be careful not to show your head too much because they could shoot you. And I just, and the fact that was not that most people in North America were not aware of that was astonishing to me. It was, especially when I was there in '85, things were bad, but they weren't this bad. Things had gone so much horrifically bad after the failed experiment of Oslo
Yeah, actually, everybody is saying that because, before Oslo, Palestinians from Bethlehem or Ramallah used to go to Jerusalem easily, and there weren't as much checkpoints as after the Oslo. So, that's the peace they want for us, for the Palestinians. They want to make it really difficult for us even to live on our whatever left of our homeland. But, you visited the West Bank, you said, and
many times. Of course, '85, but then 2003, I was there with Dr. Mustafa Barghouti and the Medical Welfare Society or Palestine Medical Relief Society. Also in 2006, I was doing mobile health vans with Barghouti's group. So I've been all over Ramallah. I've been in Nablus, Jenin, Tulkarem, Qalqilia, Bethlehem. Hebron, I've been all those places,
Yeah, I come from Bethlehem, by the way.
We probably know people in common, like Zugby, perhaps.
Yeah, I left in '67. I'm hoping to go back, but the Oslo didn't deliver what it's supposed to deliver, which maybe it did for the Israelis, which is to crush the Intifada, but not to the Palestinians. Really, it didn't deliver anything except more.
A lot of false hope and false promises.
Yeah, and more confiscation of land, more settlements, more oppression. Yeah, so. Let's go back to Gaza. You were there, you said, in 2003, and later you went after the aggression also?
Yes, then the next time I was in Gaza was 2006.
Yeah.
And that was, I was there right after a major assault. There had been an Israeli woman who was killed by Qassam rockets in late October of 2006.
Yeah.
And Israel responded by attacking and really was devastated the town of Beit Hanun in the north. And when I went in, that was still going on. I remember being under Apache attack helicopters at 3,000 feet above us, and they were shooting. And you really realize that if they want to kill you, there's nothing you can do about it. You're totally powerless. The disproportionate military power. And I went and visited a family in Beit Hanun that 19 members of their family were massacred. They were sleeping in their apartment at 5 o'clock in the morning, and Israel had pulled out their tanks, and all of a sudden their apartment was shelled multiple times in 10 minutes, and 19 of them were massacred from a single family. And I visited that family right after this happened, and talked to the survivors. And I've written about it. I have about 20 photojournals on electronic intifada. If anyone wants to read those, just type my name, DIENST, in the search engine on electronic intifada, and you can find accounts of interviewing this family and various other things that I've done. So I've seen firsthand the brutality and how the kill ratio is 100 dead Palestinians for every dead Israeli. It's been that way now since mid-2000s, and yet, all we hear about in our media is the Qassam rockets that have maybe killed 25 Israelis in the last 12 years, something like that. 4,000 Israelis have died on the highways of Israel, but nobody's going to stop driving their cars. So there's a bit of it's used as a ruse. I mean, we really need to get to equal rights for all people, and
obviously what they're doing is not for security or in response to the Qassam rockets. It's really to punish the civilian population of Gaza, and they said it clearly. They want to put the Palestinians on diet, enough to make them leave, but not die from starvation. So
that's what I have seen since.
Yeah, so
because 2006. Sorry. 2006 was right before they put the Palestinians on a diet, and then when I went back with Free Gaza movement in 2008, that had become apparent, and the deliberate man-made catastrophe, we call it, where they basically are trying to systematically undermine the infrastructure of Gaza. Both in terms of supplies, calorics, but it affects medical care too, as I can elaborate.
Sure. No, actually the medical situation is horrific there. And did you go recently to Gaza and through what? You made it on the Freedom Gaza ship there. But did you go after that?
Yes, once in 2009, and of course the book is called Freedom Sailors.
Yeah.
It's the maiden voyage of the Free Gaza movement and how we succeeded in spite of ourselves.
Yeah.
I'll talk a little bit about the book, and then I'll talk about my visit in 2009 as well. This book, it took us 3 years to organize the first flotilla. It took us 4 years to write the book about it.
Mm-hmm.
The book there's 25 of us authors. It's an anthology chronology because so much of what we did was clandestine. We basically developed two boats, and we hid them in separate harbors around Athens, and everything was need-to-know basis. So one boat was in one harbor, and another boat was in another harbor, and the crew from one boat didn't know the whereabouts of the crew from the other boat, and so it was a multifaceted operation. So when we tried to write the book about it, we really needed to have different people tell different parts of the story.
Yeah.
So that's basically, but it reads like a spy thriller novel, but it's not a novel, it's a true story.
Yeah, and you named the boats Free Gaza and Liberty. And
well, yeah, the names of the boats were Free Gaza and Liberty, although while we were developing the boats, they were under their Greek names.
Yeah.
One called Agios Nikolaos and the other called Demetrius Kappa. And so, and of course, Greece has lots of islands and lots of harbors and lots of boats, so it became very difficult for Mossad to find the boats.
Yeah.
And we had to do this because, prior to this effort, there was the PLO ship of return that tried to sail from Cyprus to Haifa with Palestinian refugees and elderly and clergy people and such like that. But what happened to that effort was that the boat was blown up. The engine of the boat was blown up in Limassol Harbor in Cyprus, and the 3 organizers were killed in a car bomb. So that was what preceded us, and so when we designed our effort, we had to do a lot of things clandestinely, so that because Mossad we were chased by spies. It was clear that we were. They were phoning us and intimidating us every step of the way. They were threatening that they would, either kill us or confiscate our boat. So we were under tremendous pressure. But we felt that we needed to, test the theory that Gaza was free. The Israelis, when they pulled out of their settlers in 2005, claimed that they had freed Gaza and that the Palestinians were ungrateful, and they responded with Qassam rockets. That's the propaganda we hear. So we decided, well, if Gaza is free, then boats should be able to come and go, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Never mind that no boats had entered Gaza for 41 years,
since
1967.
Yeah.
And we were the first ones to come in from international waters, friendly. I mean, there might be hostile Israeli warships, but in terms of friendly boats, we were the first ones to come in over 41 years.
Yeah, and if I'm correct, no boat is allowed out of Gaza either, and that's why the new project, the Gaza Ark, isn't it?
That's right. There's now a project where they're outfitting a boat in Gaza, and they're going to sail it out with Palestinians and international activists, and aboard will be products that have been produced in Gaza that are being barred from export due to a multitude of bureaucratic delay by the Israeli authorities. And again, this is really, all of these efforts have been nonviolent, unarmed.
Yeah.
They've never been any threat to the security of Israel, and certainly trying to ship goods from Gaza to international markets is no security threat to Israel. So if they confiscate this boat, it raises the ante further. And I would like to say that the royalties that are earned from our events in the Vancouver area will be plowed into the Gaza's Ark project. None of our authors are earning personal money from this book. It's all going to Gaza's Ark and also Gaza Community Mental Health Program. Those are the two areas where we are directing the royalties from this book. So if your listeners buy our book, they can help contribute to Gaza as well.
Yeah. You mentioned about the role of the Mossad about harassing you, and I think, I believe actually, they didn't finish. There is lots of things that happened that not many people even would know what they did, because it's all clandestine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one thing really that the book talks about is Riyad Hamad, and he really died in conditions that to date are not known. I believe, he was found in water with his hands.
Lake Bird Johnson Lake in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, and
his hands were found and his mouth was taped.
Yeah, so I mean, and then they claimed it's suicide, the FBI, which I don't know how anybody could believe that. I mean, considering that the Mossad was after you and Riyad was really active. There is a section in the book about him and about his involvement with supporting the Free Gaza movement, and specifically your boat, Liberty and Free Gaza. I think there is circumstantial evidence that they are behind his murder. If it wasn't the FBI or the American security forces, because the Root Institute, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, there was an article that Ali Abu Na'mi in the Electronic Intifada talked about it. They recommended to the Mossad to liquidate, and they use this word, to liquidate those people who delegitimize Israel. And I gather the Free Gaza movement and any solidarity movement, they consider it leaders who are leading the charge against so-called delegitimizing Israel. So, I mean, they later took it from the report after it was exposed by the Electronic Intifada. But, it's clear that they are after these people who are, trying to break the siege and trying to show Israel what it is, really. They're not delegitimizing Israel. They are really talking about the truth. Do you have any comment about Riyad Hamad's murder?
Sure. Well, let me tell you about Riyad. I've never met him personally, but Greta Berlin and Paul LaRuti, who are some of our co-editors and co-authors of the book, knew him intimately, and he was really our first boat buyer. He was instrumental in an organization called the Palestine Children's Welfare Fund. They would send wheelchairs and other medical goods to people in the Middle East, both Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank. They would help with handicrafts being imported into the West to try to give artisans markets. And Riyad lived and breathed this stuff. And what happened to him is that the FBI started investigating him as part of the Bush administration's so-called war on terror. And he actually wrote letters. He was kind of uppity in that he didn't back down. There had been a lot of Arab Americans and Arab Canadians that had been intimidated by the so-called war on terror and kept a low profile. Well, Riyad did not keep a low profile, and as a result, they went after him, accusing him of money laundering and fraud and quote, supporting terrorist organizations, the terrorists, of course, being in quotation marks.
Yeah.
And basically, the FBI raided his house. They stole all his computers. They stole the money, $25,000 that had been collected for the Free Gaza movement. And Paul LaRuti, whom actually Riyad's last phone call was to Paul, the transcript of that is in the book. Paul does believe that Riyad committed suicide because, especially when the FBI went after his children, it was too much. So I mean, there could be other, and Paul feels that he taped his hands and covered his mouth is to make a social statement that he was being muzzled by the FBI.
Yeah, but how can you tape your hands behind your back? I mean, that's.
Yeah, I unfortunately I can't really say more from where I stand. But Paul believed it was a suicide. And so there are people within our movement who believe that. One of our activists, Vittorio Arrigoni, the Italian, who's also in the book, he was assassinated in Gaza in 2011, and people say it was the Salafists. But I'm a little suspicious of that one as to whether it was really the Salafists or whether it was people who were in collusion with Israel, masquerading as Salafists.
No, it's
so many things happen that where they appear to be one thing and they're actually something else. That happens a lot there.
And you need really inside sources. But it's clear. The Mossad never hid their involvement in liquidating Palestinian solidarity activists and leaders. It goes way back to the late 60s even.
Even 1948, if you read Eli Pape's Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, it really, a lot of this stuff has been going on since the 1940s.
Yeah, that's true, but I meant after the revolutionary movement started in 65, really. They went after most leadership,
Abu Musa and various other people, they've assassinated a lot of the leadership of the PLO.
All over the world, too, in Beirut and France and all over. So it's nothing new for them to do it. So, but again, that doesn't frighten us and doesn't stop us from going ahead with the solidarity work, because if we want to keep their memory alive, the least we could do is continue their march. So, could you tell us about the book in general? We mentioned about the section about Riyad Hamad, but could you tell us about the rest? Obviously, it talks about the sailing and etc. But briefly, could you give us some idea about what people can expect to read in the book?
Sure. I will. I'll try to give you a brief synopsis. So there's the early chapter about Riyad and his work. And then there's how we were $50,000 in arrears, and then we used Riyad's memory and sent out an urgent announcement among our listserv, and we raised that money back and more. And so we finally had enough funds to buy 2 boats in Egypt, and we channeled that money through Greek intermediaries in, among them Vangelis Pisias in Greece, and these people had experience with clandestine operations during the time of the Greek dictatorship in 1974, and so they were well versed in clandestine actions, and so they developed the boats. But meanwhile, we had a website, we had media contact people. We kept it foggy as to where the boats were originating from. It could be Turkey, it could be Cyprus, it could be Egypt, it could be Lebanon. So the Mossad didn't really know where the boats were coming from. We purchased 2 old, decrepit fishing boats, and we had to bring them to dry dock and refurnish them, and then they had to pass Greek maritime inspection. And at the time they were passing Greek maritime inspection, they were billed as pleasure craft that Professor Vangelis was going to take his friends from around the world on a pleasure cruise. And the Greek authorities didn't know that they were the Free Gaza Movement boats until we sailed into Crete from around Athens, and then we went public. And at that point, our only defense was international media attention, because we were totally unarmed. And so the boats then sailed from Crete across to Cyprus. There were additional, with just a crew, and then there were passengers in Cyprus, among them 5 Jewish members, among them people from 17 different countries. There were 44 of us that were on 2 boats, and we then left, and again, the whole way we're being chased by spies. There were sightings of obvious spies in Larnaca where we had assembled. Fortunately, our boats were behind a security fence that was controlled by the Cypriot Coast Guard. So we had the Cypriot authorities on our side at that point. Mm-hmm. And we finally sailed to Gaza, and it was 33 hours at sea. There were high winds. The seas were very rough. The majority of us became seasick. We invested about $10,000 in sophisticated real-time streaming internet equipment aboard ships, because our thought was that if we get attacked, we can just broadcast around the world the attacks going on. Well, Israel, with their sophisticated countermeasures, were able to jam our communication systems completely, and so we were actually cut off from the world out 70 miles off the coast of Israel in international waters overnight. Mm-hmm. But that ended up working against the Israelis, because since these were registered boats of Greece, the Greek and the Cypriot authorities launched formal protests with the United Nations, and so did the Arab League, because they thought our boats were sunk because we just vanished. Yeah. Even the SOS, Channel 16, Universal Distress Channel, that all boats are supposed to have access to in the event of a Mayday, was blocked, and so the authorities thought we were lost at sea and that we had been sunk. Yeah. And so they launched protests, but that worked. All of a sudden there was mounting international pressure, and the following day, Tzipi Livni, that was the Israeli foreign minister at the time, she then announced that they would let the boats sail into Gaza because it, quote, was a peaceful mission. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This has actually been threatening us over and over again that they were going to attack the boats, and so they let us sail into Gaza. And like I say, it was a once in a lifetime experience. That when we sailed into Gaza Harbor, there were 40,000 people on the shore waiting for us. Yeah. And it was like astronauts returning from the moon,
Yeah, and I recall, they were really in a dilemma, because if they didn't allow the boats to go through, then they are really admitting that they are still occupying Gaza, and they are controlling Gaza.
That's one of the points is we wanted to challenge them on, because they claimed they had left Gaza.
Yeah. Again, Mr. Netanyahu doesn't shy away from that, though. he boat after boat, and like with the Mavi Marmara, they even killed some Turkish and one American Turkish volunteer,
So there were nine Turkish nationals, including a dual Turkish-American citizen that were killed.
Yeah. And they don't care really if this Netanyahu didn't care that it'll implicate him that he's still occupying Gaza. So maybe the old regime was more sensitive than Mr. Netanyahu. But having said that, continue, please. Yeah.
Well, let me just say that our voyage was the first voyage, and frankly, the Israelis didn't know what to do with us, and they didn't know what they could get away with. Yeah. After our voyage, we bought another boat called the Dignity that successfully sailed into Gaza and out 4 additional times. Yeah. On the 5th time, it occurred during Operation Cast Lead. That's the first time that they intercepted us, and the Dignity, a warship ran right over the bow of the Dignity and severely crippled it, and it nearly sunk, and it lit Lebanon where it was made seaworthy again. And then every attempt to enter Gaza since has been intercepted by Israeli naval forces. Yeah. What's happened is that we have empowered the Israelis because our government took no action, especially after Mavi Marmara. They've been emboldened by this, and they feel like they can get away with it, and we will look the other way, and unfortunately, so now they have raided every other attempt to enter Gaza waters internationally. But we'll keep trying. We will keep trying because we keep raising. You know, a lot of people didn't even realize Gaza was under siege before we started these efforts, and now it's becoming increasingly aware. And again, the idea that Gaza has been liberated is controls land, sea, and air access in and out of Gaza. It's like a prison. You know, in a prison, 90% plus of the prison is where the prisoners are inhabited, but the guards control the wall around the prison, and they control access in and out of prison. And Gaza is a prison, if not a concentration camp. I just want to move a bit to your next visit. You said you went in 2009, and could you tell us about the situation, the medical situation there, especially for children? Sure. Between 2008 and 2009, Operation Cast Lead had occurred. Of course, at that point, over 300 children were murdered. There was about 1,400 Gazans who were killed. The vast majority of them were non-combatants. Israel had dropped white phosphorus on hospitals and schools, among other in densely populated areas, against international norms for the use of white phosphorus, which is only supposed to be an illuminating device. You don't drop it on densely populated areas, but they've done that and gotten away with them. So in October of 2009, I was able to enter Gaza with a delegation of physicians called Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. And we partnered with Gaza Community Mental Health Program and also Al-Auda Hospital in Jabalia refugee camp in the north of Gaza. And so I was able to work in emergency rooms in Al-Auda Hospital, and I partnered with the general surgeon there, and he provided me with all kinds of pictures of war trauma victims. So I've seen what burns from white phosphorus look like. I have seen the use of a new experimental weapon designed in the United States and used in Gaza for the first time. It's called dense inert metal explosives. And what it is it's a tungsten-based alloy that explodes and vaporizes, and the tungsten, which is a heavy metal, very carcinogenic, vaporizes, and it penetrates bodies in what would be called micro shrapnel. And if it hits your extremities, it just cauterizes and severs your arm right off. If it goes into your abdomen and you survive it, you're very likely to develop cancer later. And so they've been using this weapon. They've been using flechette weapons, which are micro darts. White phosphorus, as I mentioned. So Israel is becoming a place to use experimental American weaponry, and we do nothing about it. It's not helping America's image abroad to be doing this. Although,
mind you, the military industry, the American military industry, is basically dependent on selling weapons to the Arab world, but
they are on all sides.
These people in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states, don't care about Palestinians, because if they do, they won't buy these American weapons that are really experimenting in Palestinian lives. I don't know if you've seen the report, the 2011 report, that the U.S. military industry tripled its sales to $66 billion, and Saudi Arabia by itself bought $33.3 billion, aside from $3 billion in the Qatar and $3 billion of the Emirate, which makes the Arab market is the largest. But these are other traitors who are really betraying not only the Palestinian people but their own people. it's really heartening because you are American and you know all these things. And, you know, the Israel kidnapped these boats in international water. Basically, if the Somalis did it, they call them pirates. But Israel gets the support from the American administration. What do you think of the American position towards Israel?
Well, you know, of course, part of, you know, you always have to ask why, and there's multiple factors. One, as you mentioned, is the military-industrial complex that profits from war. And to add to what the statistics you gave, of course, we've authorized $30 billion in unconditional military aid to Israel over the next 10 years. That was authorized by the Bush administration. And then, of course, Egypt is the second largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid, but that aid is upon them kowtowing to Israel. Yeah. And then you have the Saudis and you have the Bahrainis and the other Gulf states that receive. And so we're arming everybody. We're just arming the Israelis proportionally at a higher rate than everybody else. So free of charge. American taxpayers pay for that one. My tax dollars go to that, which I'm not very happy about. Then, of course, there's the Israeli lobby, or the Zionist lobby, if you want to call it that, AIPAC. They make it a liability for any senator or congressman who wants to run for office cannot be even-handed with the Palestinians, because every time they do, they're attacked by the money and the influence of the Israeli lobby. And of course, the latest chapter in that is we have, former Senator Chuck Hagel, who's been designated to be the next Secretary of Defense, and he's coming under all kinds of attack, mainly because he has made a few statements that did not toe the Netanyahu right-wing party line with regards to Israel, and so.
Actually, he said I'm a congressman for the American people, not for the Israeli, for Israel.
Right.
Because that's the truth, you know. He's not.
American. See us, our leaders represent Americans, not Israelis. But unfortunately, the lobby politics and the corruption that breeds in our country has totally. Thrown that out of proportions, and I don't believe it's representative of the average American by any stretch.
Mind
That's what we're stuck with.
Mind you, he didn't hide his support for Israel all along, but again,
he wasn't gung-ho enough about it.
So
he expressed some independent thoughts, but you can't do that with Israel. Unfortunately.
So let's go back to you coming to Vancouver on I believe you're gonna have a meeting to launch the book on this coming Tuesday, February 19th. It'll be at People's Co-op Books at 7 p.m. So people who are interested, they could come. And the address of the People's Co-op Books is 1391 Commercial Drive in Vancouver. So people could Google that. And you speaking also, and you'll have the book also in Nanaimo.
That'll be the following evening on the 20th at the same time.
At 6
I believe
it says
6 o'clock?
6 p.m. it says, but I don't have the address really for it. But people could go to GazaArk.org and get the details there. GazaArk.org. And Victoria will be February 21st at 7 p.m. I believe. It's same like Vancouver, but for some reason Nanaimo was doing it 1 hour early. So we encourage our listeners to come and really read the book. I have a copy here with me, and it looks a really good reading for people who are interested in the support work, and we encourage them. It's a way also, like you said, to support the next project, which is the Gaza Ark.
And of course, books will, and also for meetings, books are also available online. Just go to www.freedomsailors.com or go to Amazon and type in Freedom Sailors in the search engine, and you can find that. It's available as a a paperback book, but also available as a Kindle book. For those of you that like Kindle books, you can get an e-book as well.
Yeah, really, we thank you, Bill, for being with us, and for sure we'll see you here in Vancouver. And take care and keep up the good work. Do you have a final message to our listeners?
Yes, I'm for liberty and justice of all. In our Pledge of Allegiance in America, when I was a child, we put our hand on our heart and we say, with liberty and justice for all. And that's a very nice sentiment, but unfortunately it's not being practiced by our government or the Israeli government who want liberty, privileged people who happen to be Jewish and American, but at the expense of all other people. And I think that's really what it's about. We need liberty and justice for all the people who inhabit the Middle East, regardless of their traditions. Thank you. That's what I stand for.
And the equality is really a precondition to any peace anywhere in the world. Thanks, Bill, and have a good evening, and thank you again for being with us.
Shukran jazilan.
Afwan, you're welcome.
And that was our co-host Hannah Kawas talking with Bill Dines, the co-editor of Freedom Sailors. As mentioned in the interview, he will be on a speaking tour of British Columbia coming up next week, February 19th in Vancouver, February 20th in Nanaimo, 21st in Victoria. And the details on all those meetings are on the Gaza Arc homepage. You just scroll down to the bottom, they're on the far right side. So that's gazaarc.org. And with that, we conclude another edition of The Voice of Palestine. I've been your co-host, Marian Kawas, and our closing piece of music is by Syrian-American singer-songwriter Michael Hart, We Will Not Go Down, a Song for Gaza, which was written during the 2008-2009 Israeli invasion of Gaza. We dedicate this beautiful piece of music to the historic, steadfast people of Gaza.
Blinding flash of white light lit up the sky over Gaza tonight. People running for cover, not knowing whether they're dead or alive. They came with their tanks and their planes, with ravaging fiery flames, and nothing remains, just a voice rising up in the smoky haze.